Want to learn 2D programming in C++, maybe to create your first video game, all without an engine? Well, this is the right video for you. Although, I must warn you, creating a video game without an engine is not extremely easy, but it can also be a lot of fun. In this video we'll cover the basics of 2D programming with Raylib. We'll see how to create a window and draw rectangles, circles and triangles, all using only Raylib and C++. Raylib is a simple open source library for C and C++ that allows you to create 2D and 3D objects. I want to say right away that during this video I will assume that you know C++, limiting myself to giving slightly more detailed explanations when I use something complex or not very well known. I created a template for this video, so you don't have to set anything up or go crazy with CMake. You can find the link of the repository in the description, and if you use Visual Studio, with a few simple clicks we can clone the repository without any major problems. In the repository is already set up and contains both Raylib and another library called Inet, which is typically used to manage multiplayer, but we won't be using it in this video. I only included it so that if necessary in the future, you have everything you need to create your own game. This is the code you will see when you open the project for the first time. But now let's remove a couple of lines and focus on the things that really interest us for this first video. To begin with, we can see the first line init window, which allows us to create our window, entering its width, height and title as parameters. The title is the name of the window. In the example, all these properties are indicated with a game namespace, which I created to make things easier when programming. If you want to modify them, just click on config while holding down the Ctrl key in Visual Studio. Set target FPS. Tell to Raylib to update the window 60 times per second in this case. It keeps animation smooth and makes your game loop consistent. Window should close is the beating heart of our window. It's keeping the window open thanks to an infinite loop, which is only interrupted when the function returns true, when the window is closed manually or by pressing ESC. Begin drawing and end drawing. Delimit the area in which we can draw different things. Everything we want to draw on our window must be positioned between them. Clear background. This function clears our screen and color the background of white. If we didn't do this, everything that was drawn in the previous frame would remain there and the screen would look messy. By cleaning the background with each frame, we ensure that we always start from scratch. Close window. When the cycle ends because our window was being closed, this function is called, which allows the window to be closed and frees up all the resources that have been used by Raylib. Remember that you must always include it, otherwise the window will be closed brutally, which is not a good thing. Right now, if we start the program with Ctrl+5 only on Visual Studio, we will see that our window works perfectly, but right now we can't do anything, so let's add something. Let's try drawing a rectangle with the drawRectangle function, which we'll place inside the drawing area I mentioned earlier. The drawRectangle function requires as parameters the x and y coordinates of where to place the rectangle, its width and height, and finally we can give it a color. By doing this we will have created our first rectangle. But that's not all. We can also create a rectangle that only has edges and it's empty inside with the drawRectangle lines function, which requires the same parameters as drawRectangle. We can also draw a simple line with the drawLine function, which, you guessed it, requires the exact same parameters, but in the end we will get a line instead of a rectangle. Now let's change the design and try drawing some circles. This is not very different from drawing a rectangle, thanks to the drawing circle function, which allows us to draw a circle easy. This time the parameters are its x and y coordinates, the radius of the circumference, and the color. If we want to create an empty circle, we can use the draw circle line function, which requires the same parameters as draw circle. Finally, if we want to create an ellipse, we can use the draw ellipse function, which requires the x and y position as parameters, but also requires the height and the width of the ellipse, as well as the color, of course. Let's now move on to slightly more complex shapes. The triangle is composed of 3 vertices, and to draw it we will use the draw triangle function, which requires 3 vertices, which we put inside these vector2 variables from the Raylib library. Now, to better understand how these vertices work, imagine that the first vertex is the tip of our triangle, while the other 2 below are the tips of the base of the triangle. By modifying the parameters, we can obtain triangles of different shapes, whether equilateral, isosceles, or rectangular. Finally, we also need the color of the rectangle. If we want to draw it empty inside, we just need to use the draw triangle lines function, which requires the exact same parameters as before. Now, to conclude, we can draw other shapes, such as the hexagon or pentagon, or any other shapes you can think of. Thanks to the draw poly function, which requires parameters such as the position of the shape on a window, the number of sides the shape should have, the radius, and we can rotate it if we want, and finally, obviously, the color. Okay, let's try to combine what we have learned and try to create something. I have written a short piece of code that creates a small drawing on our window. It's nothing complicated, just a little house with the sun and a road. But it helps us experimenting a little with what we have learned. And if you want to try your hand at it, here's an example you can try to replicate yourself, just to test the things we have learned so far. Okay, now let's see how we can create other custom colors. In fact, in Raylib there are a series of basic colors that are defined in the class, but if we want to create a particular one, even taking it from an online color picker, how do we create it? To create a custom color, we just need to use the color variable. Inside the curly brackets, we simply enter the amount of red we want first, then green, blue, and finally the alpha channel, which manage transparency. If we don't want transparency, we set it to 255. For those who don't know, color in RGB range from 0 to a maximum of 255, and by changing the various values, we get different colors, as in this case we are created this pink. To conclude, I will say there are just 2 more things to look at. The first is setConfigFlex, which allows us to change a couple of Windows settings, such as the ability to resize it as desired, or to enable VSync on the window. There are many settings you can figure, and I leave you with a complete list here, taken directly from the code behind the library. If you want to add several to the window, just put a vertical bar and then the flag you want. The last thing I'm going to show you today is the set trace log level. This basically function is active and prints a lot of debug information to the terminal. This can sometimes be annoying and you might not be able to see the debug comments you have entered correctly. So if you want to disable them, just set the set trace log level to log none. This way nothing will be printed from the Raylib library. To conclude, today we have seen how to create a window, how to draw on it, and how to change the window settings. This is just the beginning of the Raylib library, and there are many other things we still need to see. So I recommend subscribing and activating the bell if you don't want to miss the next video. Remember that you can find the template in the description if you want to have everything ready to program. Having said that, thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye!